Hollywood has long found horror in the telephone. From the earliest old dark house mysteries to modern-day internet-based chillers, the use of technology to reach into someone's living space has been consistent fodder for horror storytellers. Black Christmas, When a Stranger Calls, and Scream are no doubt the most popular films in the subgenre. But I would argue that the category really gets its start with this disturbing made-for-TV chiller from journeyman director Philip Leacock. It would probably be too much of a stretch to say that When Michael Calls invented the idea of the frightening telephone call. After all, Midnight Lace came out a decade before. And Alfred Hitchcock used the phone to great suspenseful effect in Rear Window and Dial M for Murder. There's even a teen thriller called I Saw What You Did from 1965 that positions the protagonists as the threatening callers. But there's something about When Michael Calls that pulls it away from mere suspense into downright terror. The teleplay, by future Academy Award nominee James Bridges, is based on the novel by John Ferris, who brought us The Fury and Dear Dead Dyalla. But I don't think it's controversial to say that Bridges vastly improves on the book's misogynistic procedural format by fleshing out a family drama that's central to the film's plot. The character of Helen, who disappears in the original book in favor of a young grad student, is instead played with cautious concern by an excellent Elizabeth Ashley, who becomes our lead character. The other lead, Doremus, an eccentric loner who solves mysteries on the side, instead becomes her ex-husband, and he's played with gruff empathy by Ben Gazzara. Gazzara always brings the same kind of no-nonsense gravity as Roy Scheider, and it makes him a charismatic performer. Rounding out the cast is a young Michael Douglas, who plays Helen's nephew Craig. Douglas was only 27 years old at the time the film was shot, and this was his biggest role to that point. Douglas would join the cop show The Streets of San Francisco a year later, and he never looked back. What makes When Michael Calls work is similar to what makes Vertigo and the French thriller Les Diaboliques work. We're never quite sure if we're watching a ghost story, a psychological grief narrative, or a convoluted murder mystery. It's hard for the audience not to gaslight itself into wondering what kind of reality that they're dealing with.
He said he was Michael.
Oh, he's been dead in a doornail for 15 years.
During an impromptu family reunion when Doremus shows up unannounced, Helen begins receiving several phone calls from a young boy who calls her by the hypocrism, Auntie My Helen. The only person who called her by that name was her nephew Michael, who died 15 years ago when he ran away from home and got caught in a snowstorm. What follows is part detective thriller, part slasher movie, as the people closest to Helen get killed off one by one, and the list of suspects can never quite rule out the possibility of a little boy's vengeful ghost. As we unravel the mystery, be sure to leave a comment on what you think the best creepy caller movie is. All of this mysterious mayhem is directed by the steady hand of Philip Leacock, who had over 35 years of directing experience under his belt by the time he made this film. The result is that the film never succumbs to showy camera work that can overwhelm the narrative, nor does it suffer from the static frame that can plague so many made-for-TV works. Of course, everyone's first thought when they hear that Helen is receiving calls from a boy who claims to be Michael is that it's a prank by one of the boys from the Greenleaf School for Emotionally Disturbed Youth. Even Helen presses Craig on whether it could be one of his patients. Although the calls have a grating quality to them, it works to the film's advantage. Michael's voice is just off enough that we know that there's something wrong with it.
Annie, my Helen.
Yes, hello?
Annie, my Helen. I missed the school bus. Come and get me.
He simultaneously sounds like a boy going through puberty and an adult woman imitating a child's voice. Perhaps the most frightening thing about the calls is that they're not violent or threatening the way that callers in later films are.
Do you want to die, Sydney? Your mother sure didn't.
Threats, after all, are fading, but guilt is forever.
Hello?
Annie, my Helen. Why didn't you pick me up? I'm still waiting for you.
Michael's phone calls escalate from a casual request for a ride home from school to a puzzled feeling of betrayal and finally the horrific realization.
What do you want? Just please try and tell me what you want. Michael!
I'm dead, aren't I? I'm dead! I'm dead!
Helen's trauma isn't so much that the caller is violent as it is her own guilt over not protecting Michael when she was younger. His phone calls force her to relive the revelation that a boy she was responsible for died cold and alone. It's the same fear that drives Fred Walton's two When a Stranger Calls films.
2 children disappeared and they haven't been found yet, dead or alive. She was responsible for those children.
But there's something deeper underlying the story of Michael's disappearance. On a dizzying merry-go-round shot, Helen's daughter Peggy tells Doremus that there are people in the town that think that her entire side of the family has mental problems.
He said his mother says our whole family's crazy. That Craig is, and Mommy is, and that I'm a little nut. Is that why you and Mommy don't live together? Because she's crazy?
And this introduces another element of mystery into the proceedings. Could Helen just be imagining all the calls? Only Helen and Peggy ever hear Michael's calls, after all. As with any good whodunit slasher, though, there are a number of suspects the film makes a little too obvious. Chief among them is Harry Randall, an odd jobs man who is new in town and seems to have some anger issues of his own. Could Michael have survived and returned under an assumed name to wreak havoc on his enemies? The first enemy to drop is poor Doc Britton, Helen's friend and neighbor. Doc is like a father figure to Helen, despite his brash demeanor.
Oh, he's been dead in a doornail for 15 years.
Doc is a beekeeper hobbyist, but when he tries to quell the bees with chloroform, it just makes them swarm and kill him. A smell test reveals that someone replaced Doc's chloroform bottle with bee venom, which is the catnip of bees. But who would want to target Doc? The movie makes sure to show us Doc chastising Harry Randall for riling up the cows, and Harry expresses a weird fascination about Doc's death.
It's terrible. I mean, what a way to die.
But Peggy says she received a call from Michael threatening Doc. And Elsa sees a young boy standing in the fog that she swears is Michael. The made-for-TV aspect keeps the film PG, and that's to its benefit. When Michael Calls was part of a spate of great made-for-TV horror to come out of the 1970s, but it's one of the few not directed by Dan Curtis. In fact, its haunting score became a piece of stock music for ABC after it was used in Daughter of the Mind. It's arguably more famous for this film, though, and you can hear a definite influence on Harry Manfredini's classic score for Friday the 13th. And while most of the kills are tame in terms of gore, Leacock maximizes their impact. We watch helplessly as likable Doc Britton slowly succumbs to bee stings. Not the way most of us would want to go out. And Sheriff Hap Washbrook, already sensitive about being labeled a country bumpkin in the face of Doremus's fast-talking city lawyer ways, gets killed while doing some pretty bumpkin-y things.
Sheriff? Sheriff? Sheriff, help me!
But it's the reveal of his corpse in front of a room full of innocent children that packs the emotional wallop. Of course, since this is a proto-slasher movie, 12 years removed from Psycho and 2 years prior to Black Christmas, the usual slasher movie tropes still apply, just not in the usual places. Michael's rage is given an origin story in much the same way that Pamela Voorhees and Freddy Krueger are, through an exposition dump a little over halfway through the film.
It wasn't just Doc and Hap, I did it too, but she was so sick.
It's revealed that Helen's sister was dangerously mentally unstable to the point where she was a threat to Craig and Michael. Doc Britton was the one who determined that she was dangerous. Sheriff Washbrook took the kids away from her, and Helen signed the papers to institutionalize her. Oh, and the judge who committed her? He died 3 weeks before the film begins. 2 days after she was committed, Michael's mother committed suicide, and Michael ran away from home that day. Only his shirt and a name tag were ever found. So now Helen is all that's left of the group that put her sister away. If you want to watch this movie without any spoilers, now would be a good time to pause this video and go watch one of the dozen or so versions that are floating around YouTube right now, because apparently ABC doesn't care about copyright in this instance. Now, if all this seems like grim dark Scooby-Doo to you, you're not that far off, and you're not going to get any further off by the end of the film. Modern audiences might be more apt to figure out who or what is killing the people around Helen, but the how is likely to elicit eye rolls. Harry Randall is eliminated as a suspect about 2/3 of the way through the film, after breaking into Helen's house and trying to steal some getaway money. When he's thrown into the clink, he says that he figured that the drifter in town would be the one to take the fall for all the violence. He vehemently denies being Michael, though, and when Helen receives another call while Harry is in jail, it's clear that Harry's only other crime besides breaking and entering was committed against the acting profession.
Harry Randall.
Turn your face around this way.
Randall, Harry Randall. Randall, Harry Randall.
Doremus is lured to Hawk's farm, where he's attacked and nearly set on fire, but not before seeing a small boy in a red jacket. The boy is revealed to be Peter, one of the charges at the Greenleaf School for Troubled Youth, who suffers from mutism. And as you might be able to guess, Craig has been manipulating the young boy through hypnosis to act as a red herring while he sought revenge on behalf of his brother.
Making some progress with him, though, through hypnotism. I'm quite close to removing the block that keeps him mute.
It's a pseudo-scientific precursor to Scream's dual killer reveal nearly a quarter-century later. Your mileage may vary, but I admired the silliness of the plot, and it kept me guessing. Even though I was pretty sure nothing supernatural was happening, I did rule out Craig early on because he was just outside the door after the second call. In a time before cell phones, he just wouldn't be able to make that call without help, no matter how creepy he looks peeking in on Helen. There's a lot to love here, especially if you can embrace the occasional campiness and appreciate the killer's convoluted plot. I mean, it is a really complicated revenge scheme, but that's what makes its reveal so fun.
We found a bunch of phone calls that Craig had recorded on a cassette. Apparently he hypnotized Peter to dial your number and then play the machine.
And Michael Douglas plays Craig with such empathy that it still feels somewhat grounded in spite of itself.
Well, I've never met a psychotic. But isn't there a time when any small stimulus could send him into a world where the nightmares never end? Yes, I think so, yes.
I do appreciate that the film obeys my cardinal rule of slashers, and that's that the characters and story have to be compelling enough that if no horror ever happened, you'd still be invested in the movie. Writer James Bridges crafts a simple but appealing family drama that will they or won't they's Helen and Doremus' relationship.
He still loves her. Written all over his face.
This is a stark contrast to John Ferris's novel, in which Helen and Doremus are just two people who live in the same town. And Doremus takes up with Craig's girlfriend Amy, who we see briefly here as apparently just a colleague at the school. In one particular outdated passage from the book, Doremus struggles with a hysterical Amy and knocks her down, only to find that committing violence against her has given him an erection. Yeah, definitely an upgrade on that characterization. As a film, When Michael Calls belongs in the pantheon of great made-for-TV horror, alongside Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, The Night Stalker, Bad Ronald, and Trilogy of Terror. Watch this one with the lights out, and until next time, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, and I will see you soon.